Hello there. Don't mind me, I'm just sitting out and catching some of the non-existent sun that we're getting over here in the UK at the moment. What a wonderful world we live in, right guys? The old phrase goes that the future is now, and in a lot of ways it really is when you think about it. We have access to some of the most sophisticated kinds of technology, healthcare, and information that humanity's ever seen, and it's really accessible too. I mean, even my phone, for example, I can basically use that to access the entire sum of human knowledge. Any book, any text, any video, any song that I want, it's there instantly. And all of that technology just fits snugly in my pocket as well. I mean, if we weren't so used to it, it would be absolutely staggering. I don't even have to get out of bed and put on clothes. I can just immediately access any information I want. It's all simply just a few easy taps away. And yet, in spite of all I've said, and in spite of how easy it is, humankind has still found a way to be fucking stupid. The flat earth theory, something that's become a bit of an easy joke on the internet at this point, arguably rightly so. A load of morons that seriously, genuinely still believe that the earth is flat. I mean, we've been into space, for the love of God. This is easy. This is low-hanging fruit. Get your trolling hats on, boys and girls, let's go get them. However, if you stop laughing at how absurdly stupid this belief is for a couple of seconds, you come to the horrific realization that this isn't a fever dream. This is an actual theory that somehow still exists in the 21st century. I mean, how in the name of sanity is this even possible? Surely this kind of bollocks should have died out years and years ago. How long has the flat earth theory even been around for? We've known that the earth has been round for how long exactly? Well, this probably won't come as too much of a surprise to you, but many of the answers are hidden within layers of misconception, mistakes, exaggerations, distortions, and outright bullshit. But in this video, I, Mother Moocake, will peel back those layers and show you just how pitiable and washed up this theory of the flat earth really is. Though the fact I'm even doing this in the 21st century is somewhat alarming in itself, let me, for the absolute sake of it, take you through the complete history of the flat earth theory, along with why it's obviously complete and total nonsense.
One, two, three.
People are crazy!
Before we can properly look at how the flat earth theory has managed to stick around, we should probably also look at how long the idea of a round earth has existed for. The earliest humans would have probably assumed the earth was flat. I mean, I can't see them having any reason to think otherwise. They were probably far more preoccupied with things like gathering enough berries for the winter, or trying to kill that big, delicious looking mammoth over there. As time went on, cool new technologies like farming and metallurgy would have likely kept us distracted, and even the first, earliest civilizations like the Sumerians, the Egyptians, the ancient Greeks, and the Israelites all believed that the earth was flat. But this would all begin to change in and around the 6th century BC, when something more spherical began to appear in the writings of some Greek philosophers. They reckon the first of those thinkers to propose the idea of a round earth was Pythagoras in and around 500 BC. And yes, if that name sounds familiar to you, I do mean that Pythagoras, the one that you learnt about in school, who, amongst other pastimes, was obsessed with fucking triangles. As dull as his contributions to your maths lesson might have been though, he was by all accounts quite clever, and a little bit insane. The story goes that Pythagoras founded and led his own cult, which, amongst other insane rules, forbade the eating and even touching of green beans. One day, in around 495 BC, Pythagoras was apparently fleeing an angry horde of people who had just thrown him out of their town for being a bit of a prick. Being run out of towns for being a slight nuisance seems to be something that happened to Pythagoras a lot more than you'd expect. Anyway, as he was making his escape, he came to a field of green beans. He refused to go through it, and so the horde of angry people caught up with him, and he was brutally murdered. The end! Regardless of his vegetable-related death though, Pythagoras seems to have been the first person to propose the idea that the earth was actually round and not flat. He'd already figured out that the moon was round, and so he reasoned that the earth was probably a sphere as well. Shortly after this, another Greek mathematician and thinker called Anaxagoras managed to prove that the earth's shadow on the moon during a lunar eclipse was in fact a round shadow. And that's a pretty good indicator that the thing casting the shadow, the Earth, is also round in shape. Further down the line, in about 350 BC, the great Aristotle himself weighed in on the debate. He first observed that constellations would look different and generally come in and out of view depending how far south he travelled. If he was standing on a round spherical surface, it would make sense that certain constellations come in and out of view as he travelled across that surface. Aristotle observed a similar thing with ships coming into port as well, with the mast being the first observable thing to him as it appeared over our curved horizon. So from this point onwards, the 350s BC, the ancient Greeks seemed to have enough knowledge to be quite satisfied in the conclusion that the Earth was actually a sphere in shape. There was no further debate in their minds from this point onwards. However, 100 years after the observations of Aristotle, another great mathematician and astronomer, Eratosthenes, not only provided some more incredibly conclusive evidence for the shape of the Earth, he also managed to measure the circumference of the fucking planet. Eratosthenes was the chief librarian of the famous Library of Alexandria, that mysterious ancient wonder of the world that apparently housed all the knowledge of the classical world in its walls. Well, it did before it was burnt down by Julius Caesar in one of his sieges anyway. Dick move, Caesar. Back to Eratosthenes. He heard one day that south of Alexandria there was a city called Sinai, where on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, there were no vertical, downward casting shadows at all at noon. So over the course of a couple years, he stuck a great big pole outside his own library in Alexandria every June 21st and recorded the shadow that it cast at exactly noon. In Sinai, there were no vertical shadows at all at noon, so that's basically 0 degrees for the sake of it. However, in Alexandria, Eratosthenes' little pole cast a small shadow of around 7 degrees. Please don't take that sentence out of context. If you keep your minds out of the gutter, this is some pretty conclusive proof for a spherical Earth. Obviously, if you shine a light on top of a football, the angles of the shadows are going to be different based on where the shadow hits the surface. However, Eratosthenes could also use these shadow measurements to actually come up with a rough measurement for the entire circumference of Earth. First, what he did was he measured the distance between Alexandria and Sinai, which he recorded as about 5,000 stadia. That's about 800 kilometers if you want a more modern unit of measurement. Coming back to his shadows, Eratosthenes knew as well that 7 degrees made up about 1/50th of the entire 360 degrees of a circle. So by multiplying the 800 kilometers between Alexandria and Sinai by that 50, Eratosthenes came up with a final figure of 250,000 stadia, or 40,000 kilometers for the Earth's full circumference. What's most astonishing is just how accurate Eratosthenes' measurements were. Modern science and calculations has managed to show that he was only about 1% off the true figure, which isn't bad at all for humanity's first attempt to measure the distance of the entire planet. Suffice to say then that by the time Eratosthenes died in around 195 BC, the fact the Earth was a globe was uncontested common knowledge, with the writings and proof spreading all across the classical world, from ancient Egypt all the way up to the Romans. Now, I know what some of you might be starting to think at this point. Oh, Moocake, what about the Dark Ages? And to that I'd say, watch your fucking language. No, seriously, the term Dark Age has really started to fall out of favour in academia over the last decade or so. I did archaeology and history in university, and if you said the phrase Dark Age around certain lecturers or scholars, you'd get some fucking severe looks, dude. Maybe even like a curt remark if they were feeling especially dangerous, you know? Anyway, the reason the term's falling off is because the Dark Ages, they weren't really as dark as they've been made out to be. Don't get me wrong, when the Western Roman Empire collapsed in 476 AD, there was a huge political power vacuum in Europe for quite a while. There was plenty of turmoil as well, certainly a bit of nuance and sophistication was lost, and humanity definitely took a couple of steps backwards overall. But it was far from this huge regress back into degeneracy like a lot of history books will make out and tell you. So the shape of the Earth, by now something well known and commonplace, was not one of those things that was largely forgotten about. A lot of the knowledge that was, shall we say, misplaced was eventually picked up and preserved by Islamic scholars in the East anyway, who eventually translated it and drip-fed it back into Europe in the later medieval period. But even before these scholarly achievements, Western Christian scholars such as the Venerable Bede were writing about a spherical Earth as far back as the 7th century, without anybody giving a single shit. Bede's The Reckoning of Time was written in around 725, and it freely discusses the idea of Earth being a spherical globe in shape. Absolutely nobody at the time took offence at this point, disputed it, or even gave it a second glance. The Christian Church from around the 4th century onwards had absolutely no issue with the idea of a spherical Earth at all, and any other major world religion you can think of is absolutely the same on that point. The only contention that the church ever had was where the Earth specifically was in space. Up until 1822, the Catholic Church argued that the sun went around the Earth, not the Earth around the sun. This is what Galileo was famously put on trial for in 1633, arguing that the Earth went round the sun, not that the Earth was round. So irrespective of what you think about the Dark Ages, anyone remotely educated in early medieval Christendom would have known about and been perfectly happy with the fact that the Earth was a globe. In fact, as the medieval age went on and shipbuilding technology got more and more advanced, the roundness of the Earth would only get more obvious to the average medieval person. As more and more people took voyages across the ocean or watched ships sailing from and to port, they observed the ships disappearing over the curved horizons, and their masts being the first things to reappear. The very same phenomenon that Aristotle noted down all the way back in 350 BC. The real game changer, though, came in 1519, when Ferdinand Magellan, for the first time in human history, sailed his ship in one uninterrupted sailing around the entire circumference of the globe. So in reality then, an overwhelming number of medieval people, even the most lowly and uneducated peasant you could find, they knew that the Earth was round, and they didn't have a single problem with that fact. So if from the time of Eratosthenes onwards, the idea of a spherical Earth is well known and undisputed, where the fuck does all this shit about a flat Earth start to come from? Well, it probably starts with that common misconception that everybody in the Middle Ages thought that the Earth was flat. Obviously, as we've just discussed, that isn't true. Where this misconception comes from is a very long and complicated story in and of itself. That's history for you. But long story short, during the Reformations of the 17th century, when Protestants and Catholics were arguing about who was righter about the Bible, the Protestants started claiming that the Catholics used to believe the Earth was flat, in a way to kind of undermine their arguments and make them look more intelligent than the stupid Catholics they were fighting. In reality though, as previously mentioned, the Catholic Church from around the 4th century AD onwards had no issues with the idea of a round Earth. This was literally just a made-up smear campaign to try and make Catholics look stupid. So yeah, that's essentially where the misconception comes from. Medieval people didn't think that the Earth was flat, they just used the Earth being flat as an insult. Even medieval people thought the idea of a flat Earth was insulting. With all that said then, when did an actual grounded theory, if you can even call it that, for a flat Earth actually start to appear? Sure, there's rumours and misconception, but when did it actually properly start to take root and get organised? Well, in order to answer that question, I must take you on a journey to the very beginnings of the modern era, a world full of new quirky ideas and convoluted conmen. The Victorian era.
Are you certain this is what the Earth looks like?
Pretty sure. Almost. I mean, there are some details to be worked out, sure, but the basic concept is sound. Absolutely sound. And one thing, again, we absolutely know for a fact, this ain't it.
Jesse, what the fuck are you talking about?
Our flat Earth tale begins in England in the 1830s, some 2,500 years after humanity first proved that the Earth was round. The man responsible for its genesis was called Samuel Rowbotham. He must have had a lot of fun in school with that second name. Born in 1816, Rowbotham somehow found himself doubting that the Earth was round. I mean, surely we'd all just fall off the edge, for God's sake. So in 1838, along a roughly 6-mile stretch of the Old Bedford River in Cambridgeshire, Rowbotham would conduct a series of slightly dodgy and weird tests which came to be known as the Bedford Level Experiment. It is this poorly conducted piece of science that led him to the delusional conclusion that the Earth was flat. The main experiment involved Rowbotham wading out into the river with a telescope, holding it 20 centimetres above the water level, and using it to watch a boat bugger off slowly down the stretch of river. Rowbotham stated that for the whole 6-mile stretch, he could clearly see the boat through the line of sights of his telescope. Now, he argued that if the Earth was round, the boat should have been some 11 feet below his line of sight by the time it reached the end of the stretch. After apparently repeating the experiment a few times, Rowbotham would eventually publish his findings in a pamphlet in 1849, under the slightly strange pseudonym of Parallax. His pamphlet was later expanded into a fully fledged book in 1865, which was aptly titled Earth, Not a Globe. Straight to the point, no imagination at all, a trait that seems to be quite synonymous with flat earthers. Rowbotham also founded the Zetetic Society, which was named after his zetetic model of astronomy from his book, and this was the main basis for his model of a flat Earth. It theorised that the North Pole was in the very centre of a flat disc-shaped Earth, and the South Pole was actually a big wall of ice that surrounded the edge and made sure nothing falls off. This idea would slowly but surely be expanded and widened over the course of the 19th and 20th century, as we'll see a bit later on. For now though, back in the mid-19th century, Rowbotham would take these brand new ideas of his to public debates. Rowbotham was by all accounts a talented public speaker, and he had enough ideas and bullshit from his book to either convince people the Earth was flat, or at least create enough doubt in people's mind, enough room for people to start having discussions. Rowbotham then was a talented shit talker, to his merit and to the detriment of humanity's collective common sense. His book, Earth Not a Globe, is essentially the core foundations of the main flat Earth theory that we would know today. All that bullshit you see online, all those delusional echo chamber Facebook groups, this is where they all stem from. This is their genesis. Though it's filled with plenty of weird pseudoscience, Earth Not a Globe and its author also had a very strong religious angle to its arguments. There was quite a prevalent theme of science versus religion in the 18th and 19th century, as brand new and exciting new discoveries clashed with those of tradition and religion. Rowbotham seemed to lean into this conflict a little bit, which allowed him to contradict and deflect arguments for a spherical Earth as just part of these newfangled sinful science ideas that were floating about these days. Though it would take some 30 years, Rowbotham's ideas and works would eventually start to catch on, inspiring others to join his cause and produce more works that argued for a flat Earth model. He seems to have reached his peak popularity in and around the 1870s, with notable disciples that joined the Church of Rowbotham, including William Carpenter, John Jasper and John Hampden. All three would produce their own books and arguments for a flat Earth, with Hampden in particular placing a £500 bet in a newspaper in 1870, which stated he could prove the Earth was flat by repeating Rowbotham's original Bedford level experiment. The bet was eventually accepted by none other than Alfred Russel Wallace, the renowned naturalist who co-discovered evolution alongside Charles Darwin. To put it simply then, Wallace was good at what he did, knew he was good, and was probably very confident that he could easily disprove some bullshit and make some easy money. Bear in mind that £500 in 1870 is somewhere equivalent to around £70,000 in today's money. So Wallace likely saw this ad as a very easy way to basically make the equivalent of a couple years of his annual salary. So he accepted the wager, and with Hampden and Hampden's chosen witness, he repeated the Bedford level experiment. However, what Hampden didn't seem to account for was that Wallace not only had a vast knowledge of physics, but he was also a trained surveyor. His weird set of skills and qualifications was literally perfect for this strange, weird little experiment that they were doing. And so Wallace immediately noticed that the Bedford level experiment had not originally accounted for a phenomenon called atmospheric refraction. To put it very simply, atmospheric refraction is when light gets bent and distorted, not just as it comes through our atmosphere, but also as it hits our eyes and we kind of perceive it, I guess. Therefore, Wallace corrected the experiment to account for atmospheric refraction, redid it with Hampton and his witness, with the tests conclusively coming out for a spherical round Earth. At first, Hampton apparently refused to accept the results, so Wallace, who by now gives the impression of a man who will not back the fuck down, got his own independent witness, redid the experiment again, and completely unequivocally proved himself victorious. This didn't go down very well with Hampton, who very quickly published a pamphlet of his own stating that Wallace had cheated, the whole thing was bullshit anyway, and demanding that he get his money back and not have to pay the wager. This in turn led to several rather messy and public court cases, which finally resulted in Hampton spending some time in prison for charges of libel and apparently threatening to kill Wallace on more than one occasion. Arguably though, the real victim of this ridiculous mess was science itself. Many of Wallace's peers at the time criticised him for taking the bet, arguing that by taking the experiment so seriously, Wallace had given these delusional ideas a level of publicity and authenticity. The wager and the court cases got a lot of media attention anyway, and that probably did help to popularise Rowbotham's work to some degree. The Zetetic Society continued to be moderately successful anyway, considering that it was a small fringe group promoting stupid ideas. It produced plenty of journals, writings, and arguments of its own, so that even after Rowbotham's untimely death in 1884, the society would continue to flourish, even eventually being rebranded into the Universal Zetetic Society. My, how grown up! The society remained active and relatively fruitful up until around the First World War, when people decided they apparently had more important shit on their minds. Interest in a flat Earth nosedived then after 1918. But amazingly though, it didn't completely die. Even as the 20th century stretched on and advancements in flight and rocket technology came at an astonishing pace, the Flat Earth Society merely went underground and dormant for a few decades. It wouldn't be until 1956 that the Flat Earth theory was picked up again and given a fresh new breath of life. This was the year that the International Flat Earth Research Society was founded in Dover, England by one Samuel Shenton. It was essentially the spiritual successor to the Zetetic Society, but with a much larger focus on pseudoscience and technology, rather than the religious and moral convictions of the society in its earlier 19th century days. Now the Flat Earth Society had been updated and given a fresh new coat of paint for the space race in the 1950s and 1960s. In spite of the fact that literally dozens of rockets went up into space and took pictures of the bloody planet during this time, Shenton's support was somehow not completely eradicated. If anything, it kept trundling along at a nice steady pace. When satellite pictures of our spherical globe were first beamed down to us and broadcast on TV, Shenton's apparent comment was, "It's easy to see how a photograph like that could fool the untrained eye." And then he just brushed the whole thing off. I mean, internet trolls could only bow in reverence at this staggering level of shit stirring. Shenton then was influential in reviving the Flat Earth Society and the theory as a whole, but he would pass away in 1971. His society would continue to grow and flourish without him. Under its new leader, Charles Johnson, the Flat Earth Society would really begin to take off, amassing some 3,500 members by the time the 1990s came around. And that's not bad for a small fringe group that existed before the internet and that was peddling a theory that's so bollocks we proved it so 2,000 years ago. The society would only really begin to decline in 1997, after a house fire in Johnson's residence destroyed all of the records for the Flat Earth Society. Johnson himself would pass away then in 2001, and with him gone, the main drive for the Flat Earth Society would disappear for a short while. In fact, that probably would have been the end of the story right there, if not for one vile and terrible mistake that humanity made in 1993. Making the internet public. Arguably, its creation in the first place was a tragic error, but it didn't matter at this point, because now anyone and their mother could hop online and peddle whatever bullshit theory they fancied. So in 2004, one Daniel Shenton hopped online and resurrected the bloody society yet again. This incarnation of the movement was solely online at first, based around a small forum page that actually still exists today. It was this little page, though, that slowly germinated and grew over the next 5 years, eventually culminating in yet another relaunch of the Flat Earth Society on October the 30th, 2009. This incarnation of the Flat Earth Society is the one that still exists today. The one that you and I are familiar with. And with its launch in 2009, it came with a brand new website, a brand new digital library packed with tons of flat earth bullshit, and as well, it started taking in new members for the first time since Charles Johnson's death in 2001. Over the last 15 odd years, it's had varying levels of success, ridicule, and notoriety thrown its way. I mean, when you think about it, isn't it just insane that this even fucking exists in today's day and age? In an age where we have not just been to space hundreds of times, but also to other planets, celestial objects, and to the very edge of our solar system. In an age where, like I said at the start of the video, we have such easy access to such huge amounts of information. How can something as backward and archaic as the flat earth theory even begin to justify its existence in the 21st century? Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's about time we had a look at what these people have to say for themselves.
The Earth is flat. Why do you say that?
The evidence that we've seen doesn't suggest that what we've been told is true.
What evidence have you seen?
Well, I personally have been to Lake Balaton with FE Core, and we've actually done a laser test from one end of the lake to the, well, didn't do the full lake because it's massive.
You're pulling my plonker now, aren't you? Why don't you fuck off to the bookshop, read?
The latest version of the Flat Earth Society still traces its roots back to the Zetetic astronomy, laid down by Samuel Rowbotham almost 200 years ago at this point. To date, the favoured theory advocated by the Society is still that the Earth is a flat disk in shape. The North Pole is at the centre, and what we would know as the Antarctic is actually an ice wall, some 150 feet high, surrounding the entire planet and making sure nothing falls off. Planets, along with other celestial objects like our moon and sun, they're all floating about above the flat Earth. Now, estimates of how high up they are do vary. They go from anywhere from tens to tens of thousands of feet above our flat Earth. Some members of the Society also argue that the Earth, along with all the objects hovering above it, are also all encased in a large, great big dome, which keeps everything in place and makes doubly sure that nothing will topple off the edge. The planets and sun and whatnot, they all orbit around the circumference of the Earth. In fact, they more revolve around it in a great big circle, to be honest. As the sun goes round, it shines its light down like a big spotlight onto the Earth's surface. When that spotlight is over your particular area, it's day. When it isn't, it's night. It's apparently as simple as that, and any pesky details like sunrise or sunset could all just be explained away as tricks of our eyes and of our perspective. The circular shadow that the Earth casts on a moon during the lunar eclipse, that can also be explained away with similar levels of bullshittery. The Earth, of course, is a great big flat disk that the moon rotates above, so of course the Earth casts a great circular shadow on the moon. Shut the fuck up. Just shut up. Travel around the world in a ship or a plane, for example, is very similar to the path taken by the planets apparently above the flat Earth. You just go around the great big flat disk in a big bloody circle. Gravity doesn't exist in this model of the solar system, and instead our pancake planet is accelerating upwards at a speed of 9.8 meters per second squared. At this speed, you would reach and eventually overtake the speed of light. However, as reaching the speed of light is impossible according to all the laws of physics, the Flat Earth Society just uses this as their defense, and argues that in spite of the speed, it would still never catch up. They then just ignore this massive paradox from there, basically. One of the big core tenets that's advocated by the Flat Earth Society is relying and trusting only on your own direct senses. So things like what you can see, what you can hear, what you can perceive. Anything else, like, oh, I don't know, sources about the Earth's shape from other people, they should be avoided, doubted, and treated with the utmost caution, apparently. The Flat Earth Society call this an empirical approach, but it can also be called a zetetic approach, and whatever you call it, it's a very convenient way to just ignore any arguments and facts that don't fit the agenda. Because boy, There are a lot of those. We'll put aside the countless things we've sent into space, including humans and their eyewitness accounts, along with the regularly taken satellite photos of our planet that are beamed down to them. We'll just put those aside, because that would make it too easy, wouldn't it? Even without all that, there's still plenty of things that you'd really struggle to fit into this flat Earth model, like the ugly stepsister with Cinderella's shoe. There's the fact that all navigational equipment, from airplane controls to marine navigation to the GPS in your car, they all rely on the fact that the Earth is a globe, and they're built off of that prerequisite. Calculations done for fuel, required in things like ships and airplanes, they revolve, around the Earth being a globe as well. And in the case of airplanes specifically, those fuel calculations have to be pretty bloody accurate if you don't want to unexpectedly fall out of the sky. Some large-scale architecture, like very long bridges or skyscrapers, they actually have to take the curvature of the Earth into their designs, or they won't work. And yet all of this surmounting evidence can be easily just brushed aside using the dogmatic empirical approach. I cannot see it firsthand, I cannot perceive it firsthand, therefore I cannot trust it. Do your own research, guys, but only so long as that research fits in and agrees with what we say. This is where things begin to get a bit interesting, because now the flat Earth theory has dipped its toes into the deep water and entered the realm of a conspiracy theory. Nowadays, the term conspiracy theory is thrown around way too liberally, and it's usually used to try and discredit something. If you want to make an idea sound stupid or crazy, call it a conspiracy theory. But in order to qualify for the dictionary definition of a conspiracy theory, your crackpot ideas must involve a secret group who are actively conspiring against humanity. Maybe by suppressing certain facts and truths, or pulling strings behind the scenes in order to shape and manipulate humanity's progress. So if you just believe that the Earth is flat, that's not a conspiracy theory. But if you believe that the Earth is flat and that its flatness is being repressed and hidden, well, now you've got yourself a conspiracy theory, baby.
One of the highlights of my career, actually, was interviewing Major Tim Peake up in space on the International Space Station. Right. Now, he brought in his beautiful book. You see the curvature of the Earth. You very clearly see that it's a circle. So are you telling me that this interview with him, I'm talking to somebody that's just made that up or wasn't actually there?
Yeah, he's not.
He's not in outer space. Where is he then?
In a Hollywood studio type.
Not necessarily
Hollywood. Maybe here.
So sure enough, the Flat Earth Society seems to suggest that NASA, SpaceX, and assumedly the other 77 odd space agencies dotted across the planet, well, they're all generating fake images and fake information about our planet, and suppressing the real truth about its flat shape. NASA too, apparently, is guarding that great big ice wall that surrounds our planet, making sure that nobody gets close enough to see it, or take photos of it, or document it in any way, shape or form. How convenient. What's that? The fuel requirements for airplanes, they don't match up with your flat Earth model? Well, big oil must be in on the conspiracy too! Any controls or navigation tools that depict the Earth as a globe? Big tech, I guess, but they must be in on it as well. I mean, GPS was developed by the US government, and they're definitely suppressing some damn truth. Fuck it, they're in on the conspiracy theory as well. We'll ignore the fact, of course, that GPS was only launched in the early 90s, which does make you wonder how they've managed to dupe centuries worth of navigators who didn't possess the bloody technology. Who cares? Because if the US government are in on it, I mean, how far does this thing reach? The Flat Earth Society makes a point of the United Nations logo, which appears to depict the Earth as a flat plane if you take absolutely everything literally and possess no imagination within your skull. It does beg the question why the UN would put the flat Earth as its emblem if they're supposed to be keeping that fact a closely guarded secret, but fuck it, we'll ignore that as well, because if the UN are involved, then Google surely is involved too. And so, the internet naturally has been saturated with fake info on the Earth being round as well. It is now even easier than ever before to ignore facts you don't agree with.
To imply that the Earth is flat, you aren't just saying that NASA is lying. You aren't just saying there's a conspiracy within a single company. You're implying there's a conspiracy involving the world's 71 space agencies, 13 of which have launching capabilities. Not only are you saying all 71 of those agencies are lying about the shape of the Earth, but every single person in them is lying or being fooled by their respective companies. Furthermore, every single astrophysicist in the world is, by your implication, a scam artist getting paid to do research through telescopes and instruments that would be useless if the world were flat. So roughly 75,000 people are lying about what they do for a living. Not only is it absurd to even imply that NASA program that under the United States government could possibly pull off this sort of conspiracy, but the fact that all 71 space agencies around the world are also taking part in some conspiracy, and every astronomer and astrophysicist and astronaut is also part of the same. It just seems that so many different people are involved in this major conspiracy.
Yeah, all the.
So I guess.
Ignoring then is effectively how all of this evidence for a flat Earth works. Maybe it's even the main ingredient in this delusional recipe. All of these explanations and supposed proofs for the flat Earth, they're not really all-encompassing in their answers. Sure, they'll explain away one or two arguments and basic points about the Earth being round, but they won't explain every single point. There's always a few cracks in the answers, which can be pretty easily exposed if you know your shit, just like Alfred Russel Wallace did back with Samuel Rowbotham in the 1870s. In many ways then, ironically, the way that these flat Earth proofs work is very similar to the way that Rowbotham would go out and conduct his debates, with a convincing speech and enough pseudoscience and layman's knowledge to keep you happily satisfied if you don't peer at it all too closely. In an age of online echo chambers, of algorithms that analyse what content you like and fill your social media feeds with more of it, it's getting easier and easier for this sketchy evidence to pull the wool over people's eyes. Especially if it's typed up in a professional looking article on some sleek looking website. I mean, fake it till you make it, I guess. But it does make you wonder how many people around the world actually genuinely do believe that the Earth is flat. Well, for an easy start, the Flat Earth Society boasted some 500 members in and around 2017 to 2018. So I guess that number's probably increased a little bit since then, but bear in mind that not every person that believes in the flat Earth is going to join the Flat Earth Society, even if it does have members across the globe. Other societies and groups exist out there too on the internet. There's a myriad of Flat Earth Facebook groups, YouTube channels, subreddits, and forums that you can easily pick and choose from. I mean, apparently, the Flat Earth Society already had its first major split back in 2013 over disagreements about specifics of the Flat Earth model. A sect broke away from the organisation and stomped off to the other side of the playground to start their own club that's way better than that other one anyway. That does seem to imply that the amount of legitimate flat earthers out there is reasonably numerous. I mean, as a guesstimate, I'd say that maybe the total global figure is in the thousands to tens of thousands. A survey of US public beliefs in 2021 polled some 1,100 people from across the country, and it found that only about 9 to 12% of that poll agreed with the idea of the Earth being flat. Belief in a round Earth stood somewhere around the 80% mark, with the remaining participants all claiming that they were unsure on the matter. Bear in mind again that this is only a survey of the US, so it's not an accurate representation of the entire planet, and on top of that, there's other things that can skew results as well, such as embarrassed flat earthers lying on their results, or people pretending to believe in the flat Earth online to troll. And rest assured, there is no shortage of trolling on the fucking internet. Genuine numbers are very hard to estimate then, but I'd bank on them being on the lower side. And either way, I'm not sure it really matters all that much in the grand scheme of things. At the end of the day, a genuine belief in the Earth being a flat disc, it's not too harmful. I mean, there's much worse and more dangerous conspiracy theories out there that you could buy into. Those advocating flat Earth views aren't really getting that far either. I mean, obviously, there's no actual way to prove that the Earth is flat. It's a fucking impossibility. So any proofs they claim to have are obviously bullshit, and a feed of bullshit on loop can only really get you so far in the end. There are many accounts online of former flat earthers and their stories of seeing the light, and then there's the infamous case of the 2018 documentary film Behind the Curve as well, in which a group of flat earthers carried out an experiment to prove that the Earth was flat, and instead ended up proving that it was round after all.
If you're seeing through this hole, through the next hole, and seeing the light at the backboard, or at 17 feet off the water, the Earth is flat. If he's holding it up at 23 feet high and we're seeing the light, well, that's because the Earth's curved. So I should only be able to see it when it's at 17 feet. Okay, go ahead and drive down there, Enrique. You're gonna hold the light there. Enrique, how high is your light? I mean, you know, it's his. We don't see you, Enrique. Lift up your light way above your head. Interesting.
You couldn't write finer poetry, could you? In the end, perhaps the advice given to Alfred Russel Wallace all the way back in the 1870s is still the best guidance to follow. To engage with these societies and with people who genuinely advocate for a flat Earth, it will only make them stronger. They'll feed off the attention, and in the same way that Samuel Rowbotham did, they'll hoodwink some gullible listeners on with a crackpot pseudo-theory. It's best to just leave it alone, to not take it remotely seriously, to not even bother trying to debate with flat Earth followers and make them see reason. It would be a waste of time, and there's no possible way that you will ever succeed. As Bill Murray so succinctly put it, it's hard to win an argument with a smart person, but it's damn near impossible to win an argument with a stupid person. If someone's joined the fucking Flat Earth Society, there is very little hope of you convincing them otherwise at this point. The only person that could do that is themselves.
Look at Antarctica, you fucking idiot! How the fuck? Look at Antarctica, you fucking moron! Look at Antarctica! You're a fucking adult! Look at Antarctica! This is not your model! Look at Antarctica! Are you trolling me? Look at Antarctica! It's not a landmass in this!
So then, after all that, what have we learned? Well, hopefully for a start that the Earth is fucking round. But as well, hopefully you know and understand a little bit more about how this kind of nonsense can take hold and stick about, even after all this time. I mean, if you know and understand your enemy better, you can fight back more effectively, right? But remember that crackpot conspiracy theories of this kind are always a slippery slope that can sometimes catch you by surprise. You might not always recognise it for what it is at first, and there's always that alluring lull from joining a new, friendly, like-minded community. To be part of a group of people who get you and understand you. To be part of the small, select group of people who know the real truth about the Earth. Well, that's got to be a pretty intoxicating feeling if you genuinely believe all of it. But belief in something just for the sake of it is backwards by definition. Better to know and accept the truth than to give into some delusion for the sake of trying to feel special. In an age where so many interesting new questions are appearing about our planet, our solar system, the whole great big universe, maybe it's time to pull your head out of the sand and get over a load of boring old shit such as the shape of the planet. I mean, seriously, we've known about it being round since 350 BC. This is boring at this point. Old news. Get over yourself and ask some better questions. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I very much enjoyed making this one, to be honest. I always like a bit of delving into history, so if you'd like to see some more history-related stuff in these mockumentaries, do let me know in the comments below, because I'd be more than happy to make them. Any support, as per usual, is just tremendously appreciated. Chuck us a like, chuck us a comment, subscribe if you haven't already. You'll get pinged and notified about all my degenerate videos, and you can watch me spiral off and get angry. Isn't that fun? I've got enough mockumentary ideas under my belt to keep me busy until about Christmas at this point, but if you've got any other ideas and suggestions for topics, not just mockumentary but in general, do just let me know in the comments as well. It does really help, and I do genuinely read a lot of them. I've had a couple of good ideas recently from the last video I put. I've genuinely put them on the back burner. You'll be seeing them soon. Anyway, that's going to do it from me. Thanks again for watching. I'm off to wade myself into a fucking river now with a telescope in a desperate attempt to prove that the Earth is flat. Take it steady, remember your safe cross code, don't leave your lava lamps on for more than 6 hours, have a blessed day.